maybe you can get involved. I know you don't want to grow a mustache. I know you look as already half like a pedophile. So if you did the mustache,
fuck, bro, fuck you.
I'm kidding.
I will go full pedophile if I shaved just a mustache, though. Immediately, I won't be able to drop my daughter off at school.
Okay, so yeah, record the intro now.
So what did Milkless? Because I think we start with the name.
Two dads. We love our kids. But then we also need them to know that we're like pretty cool and it's not like a wimpy podcast. So, hey. Hey, Milkless.
Hey, welcome. Hey,
Milkless. Call the audience, Milkless. What's up, Milkless? Matt and Max coming at you.
What if that's it? That's our first take.
All right, Matt, today, October 31st, it is Halloween, but we're not going to talk about Halloween. We're going to talk about what happens tomorrow for a lot of men out there, namely our mutual friend, Seth Meyer, not to be confused with Seth Meyers, does this thing called
Not that jerk.
No,
our friend.
Our friend, Seth Meyer, who does this thing called Movember. He's been doing it ever since maybe even when they started in 2003. It's an organization that has raised almost $1 billion for men's health issues. So prostate cancer, testicular cancer, mental health stuff. Really good thing. What you do is you start with a fresh lip and grow a mustache through the month of November.
Fresh lip. I always try to maintain a fresh lip.
I always have a fresh lip. And I've never grown a mustache before. I told my wife and she's like, are you prepared to not have sex for a month? But... so what you do.
And you were like, that's only having sex one less time than an average.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm fucking with you.
You're not far off.
There's a recent article that came out that like everyone, all married couples are having less sex than you think they are. And it's like, we should share this because I think people are feeling bad about the amount of sex they're having.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're probably pretty standard.
And also it ebbs and flows. Like there's been times where you're looking at a once a month situation. But, if you're in the once a year situation, that's...
I remember talking to a guy right after I got married and he had multiple kids and he just looks at me, he just said one word. He just goes, quarterly. It's like, oh boy. Woof.
That seems very businesslike.
Yeah. It was not only the infrequency, but also the kind of financial terminology of the whole thing. Anyways, go on. Movember.
So I'm going to be growing a mustache. There's going to be some stuff in the show notes for how you can possibly donate or grow a mustache yourself if you want to join our Movember team. We'll talk about that at the end. What we want to really get into is the idea of boys or men's health. And Matt, should we divulge that we recorded an episode about a year ago?
Yeah.
When we were, just getting into the podcast, but it got really heavy, really deep. We didn't really know how to handle ourselves. We weren't as comfortable talking on macro topics.
Yeah, it felt like a big topic, but
it's something we both
we both think a lot about it. We talk a lot about it. I do think that there's like a discomfort. I think that a lot of folks have struggled to find a way to talk about men's issues that does not somehow either feel like it is or get interpreted as ignoring or downplaying the issues of other groups.
100%.
There's a guy, Richard Reeves, that talks about this a lot, who I think he's like fucking spot on. I think he's got a way to talk about this.
Yeah, he's like Brookings Institute, he's legit.
Dude's beast. Yeah.
He's not some slapdick like podcaster.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, he's in the UFC. He's like he's a real academic. And I love the way he thinks about this stuff. But I think, it's funny. It's like, I think that a lot of men's knee jerk when they hear about like feminist ideas is like, oh, this is somehow going to take from me. And it's like, no, you gotta get out of that mindset that somehow like, promoting the health, well-being, rights of women is anti anything else.
But I don't feel that. I don't know about that in modern men, like the milkless men.
Not the milkless men, but you don't think you see that? I think there's a huge...
I do. Well, that's like, yeah. So here's the thing. We're talking about an enlightened man here. Like, sure, there are the men who are like old school, maybe still say like shitty things towards women and, other sexualities and like shitty fucking dudes. Those shitty fucking dudes would be like, oh yeah, it's encroaching on my manly shit. But because that is toxic, and because there was the whole Me Too thing and so much like sick shit that like men in power were doing, we swung in a direction kind of anti-men. We've talked about t-shirts that are going out there that like, you know, the future is women, and it's like
future is female. Yeah.
Future is female. It's like, you know, mom maybe wearing that next to her son.
Yeah. I've seen that.
You know, it's just,
it's a drag.
So it's tough. And that's what it's, you know, we've talked about on previous episodes. We're trying to find that milkless middle because yes, you know, men get paid more than women, and that needs to fucking end. And there's so much like oppression towards women around the world that absolutely has to stop. But let me just throw some studies and some numbers to round us out as we dive in here. So I'm just going to get them all out. I researched this for our last episode that is on the cutting room floor, but we're brave enough to do it now. So in almost every advanced economy, girls are passing men. This is largely from Richard Reeves. We wanted to get to gender equality, right? So in the 70s, 80s, you know, we needed to bring women up. We needed to empower women, but they wouldn't just catch up. So the gender equality kind of totally flipped, at least in America. So in a
are you talking about education specifically?
Yeah. So in a very short period of time, U.S. girls today are almost a grade level ahead of boys in English. In math, they have caught up to boys. If you look at the top 10% of GPA, 2/3 are girls. You look at the bottom 10% of GPAs in graduating classes, the bottom 2/3 are boys. There's a 10% gap in college enrollment and in college completion rate. It's a wider college gender gap than it was in 1972, but it's flipped. So in 1972, Title IX was passed to promote gender equality. There was a 13% gap for men. So men were above women. There was more men graduating college. We got to fix that, right?
And there was, at that time, there was like a lot of structural things built in to to intentionally hold women back in an educational setting.
Oh, and it was disgusting. Like,
yeah,
even the women that were pushing through and graduating were probably, you know, verbally abused and harassed.
Yeah, fighting a lot of headwinds, both structural and cultural. Yeah.
Have to fix that. And we did. But now there's a 15% gender gap for women in the other direction, worse than it was in 1972. So also it's like girls' brains develop more quickly than boys. That is a fact that has been proven. Like adolescence hood happens. How do you say that? Adolescence-she?
Just adolescence.
That sounds like a plural noun though. Like the period of adolescence. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a CE and then a TS. Got it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Their prefrontal cortex, their like logical COO brain, it's 1 to 2 years earlier. It's happening for girls. And so, you know, it's not about taking the brakes off of women. Like let's love this. Let women be awesome. That is the goal. But there are some things that are slightly structured against men, you know, and there are natural advantages for women in like the school situation. Like you see like boys with ants in their pants, you know, having a tough time in that 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old.
A classroom where you're supposed to like sit at your desk and pay attention is not a particularly friendly place for a lot of boys, certainly.
Right.
Which is funny. It's the way we've always structured school. Boys did better at it when we were really holding the girls back. But as soon as we took the brakes off the girls, it's like, oh, actually the way we've structured school, at least in some of those years, really fits like young female brains better than young male brains. It's interesting.
Yeah, totally. Also, there's very few male teachers. Only 24% of teachers K through 12 are male. And in the 80s, it was 33%. Like it was higher than that back then.
Yeah. I think men are getting out of the mental health fields too. I think that like increasingly those education and care-based fields are led by women. Yeah,
it was psychology, 39% male to 29% male in the last 10 years. And only 5% male under 30 years old. It's going pure female. Mm-hmm. Like
interesting.
Also the dad deficit. 1 in 4 fathers don't live with their kids. 1 in 3 children, when the parents split, don't see their dads at all.
Yeah.
40% of women are the breadwinner. So in these traditionally masculine, like maybe toxically masculine men, now 40% of the women are the breadwinner now. So what is their role? Because if the mom is also the CEO of the house, mom is like raising the kids.
Primary caretaker. Yeah.
Primary caretaker, primary breadwinner. What the fuck is this dad even for? Our society has not it's moving so fast that these guys either need to like get the fuck involved with the family caretaking, which happens. And those are very, progressive, milkless men who are like, yo, let's go. I'll be the stay-at-home dad. Boom. And they probably feel fulfilled. But if you are stuck in that old school way of like, I'm the breadwinner, I'm the provider, I got to do this, that's all I do, like you raise the kids, blah, blah, blah. And then your wife's also doing that. That's why, not why, but one of the reasons contributing to the higher deaths of despair, 3 times higher among men. And it's rising. Suicide once every second in the world, and 4 to 5 are men.
Yeah, that is a wild stat. And it's interesting. I was talking earlier, let me kind of finish that thought about how I do think that when you hear like, hey, let's talk about the issues of this particular group, there can sometimes be a knee-jerk response of other groups to say like somehow that's going to take from me.
Yeah, like Black Lives Matter. And it's like, whoa, white lives matter.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, yes. And yeah, I think that's right. And that rhetoric has been used to actually kill a lot of programs that would have helped all poor people, because as soon as they're talked about in terms of like Black poor people and Latino poor people, there's a rhetoric that turns white poor people against it by saying like these programs are just about this group. Anyway, so I think there is a knee jerk, and I think that's the knee jerk I was trying to talk about when people talk about like women's issues and feminism, that like there can be a knee jerk from some men of like, oh, somehow this is going to take from me. And I think that is particularly tricky when you get into talking about men's issues, because men in so many ways do still hold such a disproportionate amount of the power and the wealth, by all these different metrics, like leadership in companies, like how money is distributed. There are all these ways in which men are still really powerful or privileged or whatever the fucking word you want to use. They still hold a lot of the keys. That can be true. At the same time, it is true that men are not thriving.
Right.
Because when you look at, for every 5 suicides, 4 of those are men. Like all that power, all that juice, all that privilege, all that whatever you want to call it is not translating to whatever the thing is that makes people want to live. And I was thinking earlier when you were talking about, that 40% of these households now, the woman is the primary breadwinner, maybe also the primary caretaker, also the CEO of the family. There was a really, really interesting study that they did where they analyzed a large swath of suicide notes.
Yeah, I have the Fiona Shand, I think, put it together, and the words were worthless and useless.
They took the most commonly used words in these suicide notes and say them again. What were they?
Worthless and useless.
I mean, I think there's a lot of things going on with why so many men seem to be struggling so deeply. But I think there is something that we feel, and it's funny, some like people say that's like, but it's because we can't have babies. Mm-hmm. We feel like, there needs to be a point to me. Like there needs to be a point to me being here. Mm-hmm. There was a line in that movie Dunkirk, that Christopher Nolan movie where they're like all going out, all the civilians are going out on ships to try to rescue all these British soldiers. And there's kind of a young man that is lobbying to get on one of these ships and to go into danger. Mm-hmm. And the guy who owns the boat, it's like a 3-person boat. It's like, no, you're too young. You can't come. And this kid just says, I think I can be useful, sir. Mm-hmm. And that line stuck with me because it is this fundamental way. Like he's also saying like, I think I can be brave. I think I can be heroic. I am willing to risk my life for the lives of others. But it's this very British kind of understated. All he says is, I think I can be useful. And I do think that as the world has changed in the way it has, and as like some of the things that I think men really leaned on, like using their bodies and physical strength to do useful things, to do productive things. A lot of those things just aren't a part of our life so much anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think men are really struggling for like, how am I useful? And on top of that, there is this culture now that is in this really necessary reckoning, pointed out a lot of the ways in which men can be pretty destructive and harmful. So it's like, oh, I'm not useful and I'm this predator. We have to find a way to talk about this stuff without making it feel like it is against anyone else, or it is blaming any other group for our problems, because ultimately we're half the population. Struggling men cause problems for everyone. This is kind of a everybody problem.
Yeah, totally. And like the problem is like, what's the alternative? So then lean into the traditionally female or, effeminate characteristics, like be super sensitive, be an emotional caretaker of your children, do these sorts of things. But like that hasn't quite caught up. Like on the whole, you will get a look from a mom or an older woman or mom in a grocery store, like, eyes of endearment. Oh, look at this dad who's so good. But that is not like in the common dude vocabulary of like, oh man, this guy's fucking total G, stay at home dad.
Yeah.
This guy must be in the trenches, dude. Like that's the real deal, man. Could you imagine somebody saying that? Like that dad's a stay-at-home dad. Like he's the fucking real deal. He's like,
right.
Right. We haven't caught up yet.
Yeah. That guy is all that is man. Yeah. We haven't caught up. And here's where I get the pushback against when men's issues are talked about in a lot of ways they're talked about. I think we haven't figured out what the new thing is, what it's going to look like. So I think a lot of times when the conversation happens around like the ways in which men are struggling.
Yeah, just don't talk about it.
It's either don't talk about it, or it is like on some level this desire to go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
And the problem with going back is that going back in time is worse for basically everyone except white men. So like going back is not the answer.
It's so much easier to explain to the oi polloi. You know what that word is? You know what that means, buddy?
Yeah, but I think you pronounced the first H. The hoi polloi. Fucking trying to big time me on vocab, motherfucker.
You just go hoi polloi? I don't think it's.
No, you just say it like a normal H. Like, how do you do? It's like, you said oi polloi. You made it. You made it Yiddish.
No, but then you said no. It's hoi polloi.
No, I just
you made it Hebrew.
Like, cool whip.
Okay. Anyway, but it's easier for the masses to use a roadmap that already exists and everyone's familiar with.
Yeah.
That's why Andrew Tate, at the time of the research that I did, looks like he's been kicked off Instagram at this point. But at the moment, he had 4.7 million Instagram followers.
Yeah.
He had 1 million 2 months before that. So like young men and boys out there are like clamoring for something.
Yeah.
And if we don't give that to them as parents, they're going to find some toxic fuckhead.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about like, what is this? Like, what is it gonna look like? And I was reading this interesting book. It was a work of fiction, but it was like one of those works of fiction that had a lot of like truth in it, like all the good ones do, I guess.
Yeah.
And there is a character who was a game designer and became an incredibly popular game designer. And he was kind of parsing what made his games so successful, particularly with young men. Because that is where, video games, there are a lot of young men playing video games, but that's particularly like a place the young men live, probably to their detriment. But he said this game provided what all boys want, which is a version of the world that is an adventure and that will offer them an opportunity to be heroic. And when I think back to when I was a kid, and when I think about the things about my life now that can feel unsatisfactory, particularly in the realm of like my work, it is a lack of that. It is sitting at a computer doing something that I don't feel even resembles heroic. I do think there's opportunities to create that again. I mean, this is something that I think about all the time. Like we have like, and you can debate how quickly this is happening, but I think most people would agree now that we have like a planet that's like ailing. And a lot of the work that's going to be required to heal our planet is physical fucking labor, man. It's planting trees. What is more heroic than like using your physical strength to go save the world? Like, I think there are opportunities out there for this, but like somehow we've like coded that as like pussy shit. No, that's like Green New Deal, man. That's AOC. That's fucking like, go make some money. But the problem is the ways you make money mostly involve sitting in a computer.
Right.
And mostly involve moving money from one place to another. The best ways to make money aren't by making things anymore. The best ways to make money are by fucking around with money. Mm-hmm. But I think, again, with a lack of a vision for what this new thing could be for men, this new way for men to be heroic, what we fall back on again is like money.
Right. And that's just not gonna work long term.
No.
Because women are they're going.
Yeah, we're going to lose that one. Yeah.
Right. Because they're already better in school. It's just a matter of time when the dudes stop putting their thumb on the women, they're going to make all the money.
Yeah.
So it's like, if we don't have the new thing, then I agree with you that dudes are fucked. So I like this. I mean, for research for the last episode that we cut, some of the stuff that I had that like, what is positive masculinity? And a lot of these can go to, just a positive human trait. But if we're working on like what would be defining that new masculinity, physical fitness, leadership, protectiveness, resilience, mastery, skill development, competitiveness, courage, independence, honor, and integrity. Like, all these are just like good human traits. If my daughter has any of these or all of these, she's a great woman as well. But if we were to kind of put a label on it, I know everyone's going to say, or some people may say, oh, gender's a construct. Let's not even talk about gender. Anyone who's had a boy and a girl that live in the same house.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm excited for all those Gen Zers to have kids.
They're different animals.
Anyways,
if we do swing back where we're like, okay, what is the modern masculinity? I like this. I mean, it is a man is a larger animal. That is a way to be useful. Mm-hmm. Like it's biological, similar to how women have the amazing, incredible, but painful ability to, birth children. That is incredible. And they will always have that. Well, the average male is usually the larger party, can reach the high thing on top of the, fridge. That feels good.
I watched this fucking fascinating TED Talk. This woman went to write a book on toxic masculinity. She was like really out there to investigate it. But in the process, she just interviewed a ton of men. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I started this process, I was on the lookout for how they were fucked up and messed up. Mm-hmm. And she's like, but the more of these men I talked to, the more I felt like I started to understand even the ones that there were things about them that I found troubling. I started to like at least understand why they were feeling that way. And she's like, I was talking to this one guy in New York who worked in construction, and he was talking about how he felt like he was just the lowest of the low. Nobody gave a shit about who he was or what he did. And he pointed out the window in New York City and he says, everything out there we built. And she was like, my first reaction was, fuck this guy. Like, you build a society together. What a sexist thing to say. But what he meant is that like physically the construction workers that built those buildings were men. And he thought that was valuable. And like our culture didn't. And so that's an example of a guy. What he was trying to say is like, I used my strength to make something and no one cares.
That's amazing.
And it's a really good TED Talk. I should find it and link it because to her credit, I mean, it's not like her perspective changed on what toxic masculinity was. She just suddenly had this exposure to the inner lives of all these men who were struggling.
Well, if we don't have like, if we're going to take like the word masculinity away from somebody, like you can't be a man anymore. Well, then what is it? What's left in the place but to try to emulate females, which does not work. We're maybe down the line, maybe in 100 years, gender will be gone, and we will just be this fluid, futuristic society in white fucking spandex and like, tubes in our
wear
nose.
White spandex.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like, but in the meantime, yes, we got to go out with the old, but what is the in with the new? And until we figure that out, we're in trouble. I like that. The whole like, yeah, men can build things with their hands. So can women, of course.
Of course.
But like, we also say mainly that like women bring children into this world because they do. It's a badge of honor for them.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I do think there's a real challenge with like parsing, okay, what is what is gender and what is sex or whatever you want to say? Like, what if this is like cultural constructs? Because we know that like massive pieces of this have been constructed by culture. And for many years is like a tool of oppressing women. So there is that, like, I'm not saying that that piece doesn't exist.
Sure.
Clearly it exists, but that can exist. And at the same time, it can be true that like there's some physiological stuff and some hardwiring that's just fucking different, man. And I think like everything else, we just have when the conversation happens at a big macro scale, those nuances get lost. I mean, it's funny. It's like I'll have conversations with super duper duper lefty people, like women who run all women podcast networks. I mean, these are actually specific examples, or like people who work for like the DNC on reproductive rights issues. And when we're just talking one-on-one, they say all this shit. It's when the conversation gets big. And this is why we fucking shit canned our first episode. It's like, it's scary to talk about this stuff in a public forum, not on an individual basis, because there's because
a soundbite can be misconstrued or misinterpreted, where it's like, wait, what are these two fuckheads saying? These two fucking, whatever, like, so.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of like going one level deeper and like, what are the tactical things that make a man a man? And we can start with some benign ones. Opening the jar of jam. Can't do it, honey. Oh, pass that thing over here. And it's like, the whole world is watching me now. I will get this open.
Do you remember on Top Chef? Do you remember that episode of Top Chef?
That thing's gone viral so many times.
So many times, because it's every man's fantasy. So there's this female chef who I think ended up winning. And she's making her thing and it's a race against time, but she can't get the top off the jar and her dad's in the audience. She runs and hands it to her dad. And her dad, it's like all the veins pop out of his whole body because he's just like, I will open this.
Like celebrate the modern man is strong. The modern man is intelligent and sensitive and emotional and an equal parent. But like we don't need to steal the strong thing.
Yeah.
Like when you've said it a lot on the program, like how you like to go chop wood.
I do.
Like that's got to give you a little bit of your like ding ding ding.
Oh, so much.
Like still got it, bro. Still got it.
And then our fires all winter long. I just look at that fire and I'm like, yep.
Right,
feels so good.
Yeah. So there still can be something there where even if like your wife is the breadwinner, let's say you work construction, you built that fucking building in the town square.
Yeah.
You're a contractor, you're a handyman, and your wife's fucking cranking you, making 4 times as much as you. You got something that our society values. Yeah. And you're useful and you have worth.
This episode is brought to you by the Milkless Podcast. So, Maxie, we had a thing happen to us recently where we referenced the book Whole Brain Child on the podcast, which we've referenced many times before, and then we put a Media on Social clip about it.
Yeah, that works. That language plays. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I'm hip to it.
The Media on Social.
Yep, we did that, and then the woman that co-wrote the book said hello, and then we asked her if she wanted to be on the podcast, and she said, yeah, probably. But then, this is no knock on her. She's got a new book coming out. She's a real person. Her media people were like, how many people listen to your podcast? First question they asked. We were able to give them a pretty good answer. I mean, we're getting like 10,000 listens a month. It's enough to get like some real people to come on the program, which is exciting for us. Hopefully it's exciting for you. But the more people we have listening, the more guests of that caliber we're going to be able to get. Like the kind of people who are writing the books that are informing the way we think about parenting. We actually fucking talk to them. So tell your friends, because if you tell your friends and they listen, next thing you know, we're going to be going after, I don't know, Justin Bieber, or I don't know, maybe somebody better than that.
I wish we could think of somebody better than that, but
Alec Baldwin?
Yeah.
Oh no, he shot someone.
No, but that was an accident.
Diddy. So we could get Diddy.
Jesus.
So I frequently rag on the like overlap fitness / dad influencer where they like, they're like, don't you want to be able to like chase your kids around when you're 50? Like if you don't have a 6-pack, you're failing them.
Yeah. You fat piece of shit. It's like, that's really good.
Yeah,
that's good.
That's helpful.
Good for men's mental health. It's really good.
I came across one of those guys and I looked at the description on his channel and he was like get fit, find your discipline. Discipline is a big word that a lot of men are talking about these days, which I think is interesting because I think there's a good side of it that's like, do what you say you're going to do. But I think there's also a side of it that can slip into like repression pretty easily and just like being like, just stop it, just do it. And it's like, that doesn't work for people. But anyways, so he was like, find your strength and your discipline so that you can be the hero of your family. And I was like, actually, I want my kids to be their own heroes. Like, I want us all to be the hero of this family. I don't think my job is to be like the hero father of the family. I want my kids to be proud of me. I want my kids to look up to me. But a big part of this, when we go back to like, how do men feel useful? I think another thing we've lost, and this is like a big, big idea, but is this sense of collectivism. I mean, I feel like a lot of us feel like this is America, this is a business, and you're here for yourself. Like, you got to get yours. And we all, men and women, but maybe it's affecting men in this particular way, want desperately to feel like we are useful to something more than ourselves. And that, I think, is another big piece of this. Like, this is not just about getting yourself ripped and going and making that money so you can be a man. Like, how can you be in service to something that is bigger than you?
I think you're going super deep. I think you're in the subconscious right now. So let me say what was something you made me think about in the front of mind that is very American. It's in the movie Far and Away with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, the movie they met on, where there's like, you know, the thing back in the day where it was like, you know, not the gold rush, but something where like people just ran on horses and put a stake
it's like
in the
a
ground.
land giveaway. Yeah.
Land
like, go home
thing.
or something.
Yeah. Just like they wanted people to like work the land and pay taxes. So it's just like they lined up and ran and then stake it. And like, it's really every man for themselves at that point. I mean, you got to build your house. You got to do everything.
Yeah.
And that's like, there's something nostalgic about that, but that's not how the modern society works. So I think that that's where even this influencer guy, it's like, it's on you. Do it your fucking self. Like, don't talk to other people. Like, be a fucking hero. Put the stake in the ground, build the house, do all these things. And the thing that I don't like about the whole like discipline thing, it's like, yes, be more disciplined and be the hero of your the hero of your family thing is like, what if the fat dad is already the hero of the family? Because he's fucking giving everything to the kids and the family and he's doing nothing for himself. So,
because he makes up a story every night that makes his kids laugh. Like, there's a lot of ways to be the hero to your family.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's like bullshit. Yeah, I mean, I think we all yearn for that thing we talked about it before, like the village coming together, like, and a big thing that Movember talks about is like, they have this really cool video, you know, kind of about like reading people's suicide notes and that survived. They read them themselves. And it's like, you know, you hear the term like, oh, he's a man of few words. They say like, you need to be a man of many words. Like, we need to have this thing where we can share our feelings and talk about this sort of stuff. Like, that's one of the main things that a lot of the guidance out there for boys is saying is like, if there are boys that have a young men's like health group or boys club, or like some schools have boys groups where boys can just kind of talk and say what it means for them to be a boy or what type of man they want to be someday, which sounds like weird. Like, why would you need to do that? But those sorts of things, like talking about this stuff. And then that gets to what you're saying, this collectivism of like,
being a part of something.
Right. Because if we don't have that, then it just gets passed down by someone like an Andrew Tate with this toxic masculinity, like that women should blah, 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 go back to, and then we go back to they're trying to go back. It's like, we need to go forward. What is
make that money
thing?
And go back. Yeah. I do think another huge piece of this, I mean, that women also outpace men on life expectancy. Some of that is just like men take some dumb risks sometimes, but that's not the only factor. There's also men are getting increasingly outpaced by women on life expectancy in a world that is less and less physically dangerous. The pockets of places where that is not true are the pockets where culturally men have as many close connected relationships in their life as women do.
Yeah.
Like, friendship is good for you. Having someone to talk to is good for you.
But what you may just think of is like a big part of this is sort of, we just need to emulate what the women are doing, because women, I mean, to be honest, like, we don't want to just like act like women, but we can take some cues because they have some of this shit figured out. They have way more friends on average, way more social, way more connected. In addition, they have a lot of purpose if they're the head of the household. They're the COO of the household. They're cooking the dinners. So as much as we can take some of those responsibilities from your partner, one, that gets you closer to 50-50. So your relationship is probably way fucking better. Two, you get some more self-worth and usefulness out of it.
You devote yourself to something larger than yourself,
Right.
which like, it doesn't have to be a personal glory. It's like, no, I'm doing this so the family will work better.
But then you can still go chop wood and or build a tree house in your backyard and be a man. And maybe the modern man is doing laundry, cooking dinner, 50% parent in the household. But you also happen to be bigger and stronger and you open the jar of jelly.
Yeah, I've really thought about this a lot in recent years because there's parts of me that are so strangely traditionally male.
Right.
Like I will catch myself like in the garage, drinking a beer, watching Goodfellas next to my chainsaw that I didn't put up just because I like looking at it.
Yeah.
You know, I like carry a knife on me. I like know how to use a shotgun for the snakes in my yard. I have all these things that you'd be like, whoa, like this guy.
Well, you also live in Texas, so that kind of like mans you up like a hare, even if they're a liberal wuss.
Maybe like some of it's just cultural. The knife was given to me by my mother-in-law, who is more man than most of us. She fucking works a ranch every day. But then there are also these parts of me, like I have for a long time been the male friend that guys talk about their feelings to.
We met singing Rodgers and Hammerstein, like West Side Story.
That wasn't Rodgers and Hammerstein.
It's not Rodgers and Hammerstein, is it?
Is that Sondheim?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, who is
Thank
it?
you. It's
oh man. Just remember, listeners, as we have this conversation, that I also carry a knife. So there's balance.
Leonard Bernstein.
Bernstein. Of course it's Leonard Bernstein.
What is wrong with us? Or me primarily.
What is wrong with us?
We like to sing and dance and put on makeup and carry a knife and explore the topics of modern masculinity. It's just...
I just think we've got it's like we've abandoned some of these things about masculinity that are could be healthy in favor of some things that aren't. It's like we're trying to fill up some hole with something that's not actually going to fill it and is therefore going to ultimately become toxic and fucking weird. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And ultimately not benefit us.
Hold on. What if you're a man who's really wiry and skinny and thin and unathletic? Are we kind of...
I was listening to this interview a long time ago with Nick Offerman, Ron Swanson.
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec. Strong mustache. Bring him back in November. He was a carpenter because he didn't really hit it as an actor until like his 40s, until Ron Swanson. Mm-hmm. And so he worked as a carpenter, largely for movie sets. But he talked about this thing where he's like, using my body and my brain at the same time has always made me feel grounded in myself. And I don't know if that's specific to men or if that's just, I think all humanity leads a more disembodied life than is probably healthy at this point, or most. But that always stuck with me. It's like, it doesn't have to be your strength. It's just like, use your brain and your body at the same time to do something useful.
You know how many people I've met when I talk about passions? I'm like kind of like a passion guy. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, what do you love? The amount of people who say like carpentry, so many.
Yeah.
It's like, and mostly dudes, or almost all, it's only dudes who've ever said it, but it's like 1 in 3. Yeah. Is like, I've always wanted to do carpentry, and you don't need to be strong for that.
And there's other things too that I think are maybe thought of as more female, but like gardening, like putting things in the ground and then watering them. Like that is a physical, you dig. And there's also a caretaking element to that.
My father-in-law, my wife's dad, you know him. He had a landscaping company for like, I don't know, 30 years or something. And to see him get into the dirt, he's not jacked, very thin, has always had washboard, skinny legs. Yeah. But you see him just take the earth. There's something so fucking manly about that when he's just like, give me that tree, give me that plant. Just digs this fucking hole real fast. Like, and then the whole thing is like revamped in like an hour.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's something there. With that said, my wife loves landscaping too, so it's not only men. But we're talking in generalities.
And none of these things, when I think about the things that I really want to be as a man and define myself as a man, if I list those traits, they're almost all traits that would be good for anyone to have. I don't there's no exclusivity to these things. Right. We're not saying like women can't do this. What we're saying is like, these are things that at least for me and a lot of the men in my life that I know have helped them feel like they want to feel. Mm-hmm. It's funny, man. We were ragging on Gen Zers earlier, which is fun because it's what you do. I had a bunch of Gen Zers on a production crew. And over the course of this season, the show we shot, we had one of our lead camera people transition male to female. And she is a really good friend. We work together all the time. She's wonderful. But I was talking to a younger crew member and we were talking about some of this stuff. And I was like, I'm really trying to figure out how to define masculinity for myself in a way that doesn't take anything from anybody and feels modern, but also feels like it honors these things I feel. And this like 22-year-old who worked for me, God, they really had some balls. For like 2 years, they were like, I'll just fucking say anything. She was like, yeah. And then you might ask yourself too, like, why is it even important to you to feel masculine? And in the moment, I was so surprised that she'd said it that I didn't say anything. But if I could go back, what I wish I had said is like, why don't you ask our good friend who's transitioning why it's important to her to feel feminine? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a great question. Why is it important to me to feel masculine? It is. I don't know. It's part of how I understand myself. Mm-hmm. So I need to define it in ways that are healthy for me and for the people around me.
Right. And that's, to go back to the milkless middle is like, or whatever, is like, it doesn't mean that if you believe one thing that the converse is not true or something. You know what I mean? Like, well, if this is masculine, then it can't be feminine. It's like, no. The second part does not even need to be stated.
Yeah.
It's just like, as a man, how do you want to feel? If you have boys and you're a mom listening, how are your boys going to grow up in this world? How are they going to feel about, and maybe they can grow up in a total gen, whatever the next gen is, Gen Q. They'll be like,
what are our kids? Alpha? Our kids are Gen Alpha, right?
Okay. And then they'll be like, yeah, gender's a construct and cool. And we need to understand them and love them however they want to experience it. But if they are searching for something, I don't know. I think this works for me. Mm-hmm. That I like the, using your hands as using your mind and body to build something. And sure, my daughter might be that way too. And that's fine too. Mm-hmm. But if we're searching for something on the macro scale, we don't typically do it on the Milkless podcast here. But, we're stepping into uncharted territory, talking about a huge topic. And I hope you guys can feel our trepidation with the topic. We don't want to ruffle any feathers, but it is something that we're both quite passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that exercise of like trying to pull apart the things about masculinity that are intrinsic and positive and need to find an outlet versus the things that have been constructed as tools of hierarchy and oppression. Like that is an incredibly valuable exercise that we're in the really uncomfortable middle of. And you see like some baby getting thrown out with bathwater, and you also see some bathwater being framed as baby. Mm-hmm. And it's a complicated thing, but I think it is just so critical that we get it right, because if we have like a society in which half of the population is struggling mightily, it's not going to work that good. Like the whole thing ain't going to work that good. And all of these trends in education, in suicide and deaths of despair, like all of these in positive relationships and friendships, like all these are kind of not going in the direction you want to see them going. So it deserves our attention, even though in all of these ways, men still hold a lot of power. And in all of these ways, men still cause a lot of problems.
Right.
The less attention we give this, the more problems they're going to cause.
100%. So, in closing here, maybe just some final takeaways, like some things that I keep thinking about is, look, these are big macro scale things. And maybe when this podcast has, 10 million daily listeners, we can affect change on the global scale. But in the meantime, for the people who are listening, I just take it internally. Think about your family, especially if you have boys or you have nephews or there's boys in your neighborhood. Just thinking about that, there are some things that maybe your children need in terms of staying connected with them and understanding that, this isn't quite figured out in society for them. So they might be getting mixed messages where 72% of boys have been told act like a man, or a real man. That's not how a real man acts.
Wow.
So they're getting some of that from that side. And then on the other side, it's
future is female.
Where do they land? A lot of the outside messaging is either the way you're doing it is wrong or boys are bad.
It's funny. I think about that difficulty for what are we pointing towards? What is positive masculinity? And it's funny because a lot of people come frequently, very high universal approval rating for Keanu Reeves. Mm-hmm. And what cracks me up about this is that Keanu Reeves has all these great traits. He seems to be incredibly thoughtful, soulful. He has been shaped by grief into a certain kind of wisdom. He's super non-predatory toward women. He drives an old truck and rides the subway and has stayed normal despite his immense wealth and fame. All that's awesome, right? In his movies, he kills thousands of people with guns.
Knows karate.
Chop
your head off with a judo chop.
Dude, and it's done more for his movies are very they could only be described as pro-violence, pro-gun. In John Wick, he solves all of his problems by killing people, right? Mm-hmm. And it's awesome. And I've watched all those movies because they're fucking awesome. And I'm not saying that it's bad that he's doing that. I like those movies. I'm just saying that the way this guy has achieved perfect masculinity is to be a soulful, kind, soft-spoken, wise millionaire who made his millions through the play acting of murder of large groups of people. And that is not a realistic, attainable target for most of us. So what's it supposed to look like? And I think that the things that I are sticking with me from this conversation are how can you use your body and your brain to do something useful? And I like exercising. I like lifting weights. I like to feel strong. But I think for me, there's got to be another step beyond just making my body into this thing. It's okay, what do I do with that body that helps people and not just me? I think friendship and you're saying being a man of many words, I think that is absolutely central to this. And I think finding a way to define it that's truly your own, that doesn't say I need to adopt this whole set of things. I like watching UFC, so I also have to adopt the politics and gender politics and everything surrounding that. It's no, you can like that and like gardening.
Yeah.
This is something that you find for yourself.
Right.
That you get to define for yourself in a way that does no harm.
And the last little thing, something that you've said a lot that's helped me is kids don't listen to you, they watch you. And the best thing that we can do for the dads listening, is basically set that good example. What does that example look like? I'm doing a ton of work internally in our house to try to be more of an equal parent with my wife, who's the COO and, run stuff. The more I can take off her plate, the more I can show the kids that look, this is how it works. If I don't step up, then either my kids are going to be louts like dad was, or I'm going to be the fucking laughing stock because they're going to emulate modern masculinity. Hopefully that takes off, and, or my wife, and I'll be just like the fool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, anyway, that's two of my main motivations for really owning this 50% thing, in the house.
And the other thing that I have seen you do a ton, and it comes back to that discipline thing, and it comes back to talking about these things and really earnestly trying to understand ourselves, is not just meeting the behaviors that we don't like about ourselves or the tendencies or the draws that we don't like about ourselves, not just meeting those with discipline. There's a classic, it's an old sketch with the guy, he's a comedian, he was in Elf, he played Will Ferrell's dad. He's the
Bob Newhart.
Bob Newhart, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's playing a therapist, and this client comes in to see him, is talking to him, and Bob Newhart just keeps saying, "Well, but then just stop it. Just don't do that. Just stop it." That shit don't work.
Yeah, easier said than done.
It's easier said than done. So I think figuring out, not just saying, "Hey, there's this behavior I don't like that doesn't make me feel like who I am. I need to have the discipline to just fucking stop it."
Because that works for like a week.
That works for like a week. Figuring out like what part of me wants this? What part of me keeps doing this and can't stop? What part of me can't get started on this thing that I know I want to do? And then like bringing those things out into the light. That's how you get to the place where the discipline is there. The discipline is a byproduct of having worked through the things you need to work through to act the way you want to act.
Sweet. So if you want to join us on
what do they do for Movember?
Well, here's the thing. Maybe you can get involved. I know you don't want to grow a mustache. I know you look as already half like a pedophile. So if you did the mustache.
Fuck, bro. Fuck you.
I'm kidding.
I will go full pedophile if I shaved just a mustache, though, immediately. I won't be able to drop my daughter off.
I disagree. You'd be way like, you'd look really good with it. But anyway.
I appreciate that. That's nice.
So what you can do is you can go to the Movember website. We'll put the link in the show notes. You can either, if you want, you can donate like $5, $10, whatever to my campaign, or you can join me, make your own thing, join the Milkless Mo team and join and do Movember yourself. Now, if you do that, there's 3 ways to do it. I think you can do one, you can do grow a mustache. So basically on November 1st, you shave, clean lip, and you grow a mustache over the course of November. It sparks conversation, and you can see if other people want to donate to your thing. The other thing you can do is you can walk 60 miles or run 60 miles, I think, is another thing you can do over the course of the month. So it's like 2 miles a day or on average. Or the third thing is you can just like say some feat you're going to do over the month. I don't even know if it has to be physical. You could say, I'm going to paint my bathroom. I'm going to chop all this wood that I need to chop. So one of these 3 things, if you want to join on. It starts tomorrow, November 1st. I think you can even join late. And we'll see. Maybe it'll just be me in there. and when you're listening, you're going to Scope, and there's just me in there.
Another way you can get involved is to just mercilessly make fun of Max's emerging mustache. I remember seeing your brother with an emerging mustache one time, and he just said, he's like, this is the first time I've looked in the mirror and really thought, I'm a quarter Asian. Cracked me up. It just killed me.
So do you think you might get involved?
I should think of a feat. I like the idea of doing something. It would be particularly cool if I could do it with my daughters of like, this is a good time of the year to plant trees. So like setting a goal for like planting a certain number of trees and then just doing that. Because I think that kind of hits a lot of those things of like how I want to feel,
Yeah. Love it.
All right. Yeah. Let me see if I can figure that out. And thanks for bringing this in and doing this. This is a topic that, makes people nervous, but I think that's not a reason to not talk about shit that's important.
No, we got to do it. So, all right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And hopefully you join us, or if you don't want to join, donate, $1 or whatever you want to Men's Health.
Cheers.
November.
Brought to you by Violet Archer.